When someone truly loves you deeply, the intensity of their feelings can often create the exact opposite behavior you might expect. Instead of showering you with constant affection or attention, they sometimes withdraw, they ignore, or they act distant. It feels confusing on the surface because the mind naturally assumes that love should always equal closeness, consistency, and presence. But when emotions run that deep, it often triggers something far more complex. Fear of vulnerability. The deeper the love, the higher the stakes. When a person realizes how much you mean to them, suddenly every interaction carries more weight. Every word, every glance, every response feels magnified because in their heart they know losing you would hurt more than anything else. That fear can push them into silence or avoidance, not because they don't care, but because they care too much. Vulnerability can feel like standing on the edge of a cliff with no safety net. To love is to risk. To love is to hand someone the power to hurt you. And when the love is overwhelming, that power feels almost unbearable. So instead of opening up and risking rejection, many people go quiet. They ignore calls, they hold back messages, they don't initiate. It isn't about lack of feelings, it's about too many feelings. When love is light, when the connection is casual, there is nothing to fear. You can speak freely, act freely, and there are no consequences. But when the heart is invested, when the thought of losing you terrifies them, ignoring can become their strange form of protection. They convince themselves that if they pull back, if they hide their feelings, maybe they won't expose too much of their heart. Maybe they won't look too desperate, too weak, or too dependent. This fear of vulnerability comes from a place of insecurity deep within. The thought process often goes like this: if I reveal how much I love them, they might not feel the same. If I show too much, they might pull away. If I let my guard down, I could get hurt. And so they put up walls, they distance themselves, they act like they don't care, even when inside they are consumed with emotion. That's the paradox. Sometimes the ones who love you most will act like they don't, not because their feelings are absent, but because their feelings are overflowing. Ignoring can also be a defense against uncertainty. When you love someone deeply, you start to imagine the future with them. You create emotional investment that stretches far beyond the present moment. If there's even the slightest doubt about how secure the relationship is, the fear of heartbreak can feel unbearable. To avoid that pain, they hide behind distance. It's easier to pretend they don't care than to expose just how much they truly do. Bathroom is like, it's easier to act cold than to risk being told that their love is not returned. This behavior often confuses the other person because it feels contradictory. You may sense their love in their actions, in their eyes, in their body language, but then their silence tells a different story. This inconsistency creates tension, and that tension is born from their internal battle. They want to give, but they are afraid of being rejected. They want to open up, but they fear you won't understand or reciprocate. They want to love freely, but the thought of being that exposed terrifies them. It's important to realize that ignoring does not always mean disinterest. Sometimes it is exactly the opposite. It is the mark of someone who is struggling with emotions so powerful that they don't know how to handle them. They would rather suppress their love than risk the pain of showing it and not having it fully returned. They would rather appear distant than risk being judged for caring too much. That distance is their shield, their mask, their way of maintaining control in a situation where their heart feels anything but in control. This is why the one who loves you a lot might ignore you a lot. Their silence is not empty. It is full of unspoken emotion. Their distance is not absence, it is protection. Their avoidance is not lack of care, it is fear of care. In their mind, staying guarded feels safer than opening up, even though it leads to confusion and miscommunication. They are battling themselves, torn between the desire to connect deeply and the instinct to protect their heart. The irony is that love was never meant to be safe. Love was never meant to be guarded. Real love demands risk. It demands openness. It demands vulnerability. And the very thing they are running from, the fear of being hurt, is also the very thing that could allow them to experience the fullness of love with you. But when fear is stronger than courage, ignoring feels like the only option. So when you find yourself wondering why someone who clearly loves you acts like they don't, remember this truth. Deep love often awakens deep fear. The closer you are to their heart, the more dangerous you feel to them because you hold the power to wound them in ways no one else can. And that fear of vulnerability is often why the one who loves you the most can sometimes act like they don't love you at all. And that is why the one who loves you a lot ignores you a lot, because love makes them vulnerable in ways they don't know how to handle, and ignoring becomes their shield against the risk of being hurt. When someone loves you deeply yet chooses to ignore you, it often isn't about indifference or lack of care. It's about testing the dynamics of the relationship, sometimes without even realizing it. Human beings are wired to want reassurance, to want confirmation of their worth in someone else's eyes. And when feelings are strong, the stakes are high, and people can begin to wonder, am I truly valued? Would this person fight for me? Do they see my worth the same way I see theirs? That's when ignoring becomes a tool, whether conscious or subconscious, to test your value through space. This isn't about games and the way most people think. It's more about psychology. When someone pulls back, they create distance to see how you will respond. If you immediately chase, beg, or over pursue, it signals to them that they have control, that their love can override your sense of balance and self-respect. On the other hand, if you remain calm, grounded, and focused on your own life, it shows strength. It shows that your love for them exists, but does not depend on constant validation. That reaction often tells them more about you than words ever could. Think about it. When someone ignores you, your natural instinct is to wonder why. You might feel anxiety, frustration, or even anger. Many people respond to that by overcompensating. They send multiple messages, they try to initiate constant contact, they demand answers. But what that does is expose a lack of self-control. It communicates neediness, desperation, and fear of loss. And nothing kills attraction faster than the realization that you're clinging too tightly. That's why the person who loves you may ignore you to see whether you will lose your balance, whether you will betray your own self-respect in an attempt to pull them back. But when you don't chase, when you allow them their silence, when you stay composed, they learn something important about you. They learn that you value yourself enough not to collapse under the weight of uncertainty. You prove that your emotions are steady, that you are not easily swayed, and that your worth is not defined by their constant attention. That kind of composure is magnetic because it shows that you can handle the natural ups and downs of connection without losing who you are. This test of value through space also reveals how deeply someone understands attraction. The truth is, attraction grows in space. It grows when there's room for someone to wonder, to reflect, and to miss your presence. By ignoring, even if unintentionally, they create that space. They might think, if I step back, will they come running? Or will they let me breathe? And if you allow them to breathe, it often has the opposite effect of what you fear. Instead of losing them, you actually increase their desire to be closer because your strength stands out in contrast to the reactions they might get from others. Another layer to this is control. Love makes people feel vulnerable, and vulnerability often makes them crave control. By ignoring you, they create a sense of control over the dynamic. But what they don't realize is that the true control doesn't lie in silence. It lies in your response to it. If you remain poised, if you don't allow their behavior to dictate your emotions, then you hold the real power. That calmness communicates confidence and confidence is the foundation of attraction. It's also important to recognize that ignoring is not always a conscious choice. Sometimes people act distant because of fear, insecurity, or even confusion about their feelings. But even in those moments, the principle remains the same. How you respond determines the message you send. If you interpret their distance as an opportunity to prove your worth by over pursuing, you lose ground. If you interpret their distance as space for both of you to breathe and reflect, you maintain your dignity and respect, and respect is what keeps love alive. The paradox is that the more you chase someone who is ignoring you, the more they feel suffocated. They may love you, but love without space feels like a cage. When you give them room to pull back, you give them the gift of freedom, and freedom often draws people closer than pressure ever could. It's why silence and space are not always threats. They can actually strengthen the bond if handled with maturity. Think about every relationship that thrives over time. The healthiest dynamics are not built on constant reassurance, but on mutual respect. They are built on the understanding that love is not about clinging, but about choosing, and choices mean freedom. If someone loves you and ignores you to test your value, your job is not to panic or prove yourself. It's to stay grounded in who you are, to show that your love is strong but not desperate, available but not needy, giving but not self-erasing. The lesson here is clear. Love that ignores is not love that is absent. It is love that is searching for confirmation of balance. It is love that wants to see if the connection can survive without constant chasing or reassurance. And if you respond to that test with composure, with dignity, and with patience, you prove that your love has depth, stability, and power. And that is why the one who loves you a lot might ignore you a lot, because deep down, they are testing your value through the space they create, and your response to that silence tells them everything they need to know. When love runs deep, it often overwhelms the person who feels it. Strong emotions can be exhilarating, but they can also feel suffocating when the intensity becomes too much to handle. This is one of the main reasons why the one who loves you a lot might end up ignoring you. It's not that they want to push you away, but rather that their feelings overwhelm them to the point where they feel they need to protect themselves. Love is supposed to be freeing, but when emotions become so strong that they feel uncontrollable, a natural instinct kicks in to pull back, to create space, to shield the heart. People who experience emotional overwhelm don't always know how to manage their feelings in a healthy way. They may fear being too much or exposing themselves to rejection. So instead of expressing what they feel, they hide it behind silence. Ignoring in this context becomes a form of self-protection. They're not ignoring you because you don't matter. They're ignoring you because you matter so much that it scares them. But they feel vulnerable, and vulnerability for some people feels like danger. To them, taking a step back feels safer than risking full exposure of the heart. You may notice that when emotions are light, there's no issue. They respond freely, they laugh openly, they engage without hesitation. But when the love becomes stronger and the bond starts to deepen, that's when the walls go up. It's not because the love has decreased, it's because it has increased to a point where it threatens their sense of control. That loss of control can be terrifying. Suddenly, their happiness feels tied to you. Their peace feels tied to you. Their future feels tied to you. And that dependence can make them panic. To calm that panic, they retreat. They may not say it out loud, but the silence is their way of regaining emotional balance. This can be incredibly confusing for the one on the receiving end. You feel their love, you see it in their actions, but then you also feel the sting of being ignored. It feels contradictory, almost as if they're playing games. But more often than not, it's not a game, it's a struggle. They're battling with emotions that are bigger than what they know how to handle. For some, ignoring is the only way they know how to cope with feelings that overwhelm them. They think if they create distance, they'll be able to breathe, reflect, and protect their heart from being completely exposed. It's also important to understand that for some people, love can trigger old wounds or insecurities. Maybe they've been hurt in the past, maybe they've given too much before and been taken for granted, or maybe they simply fear abandonment. When they love deeply again, those fears resurface. Ignoring becomes their way of keeping a safe distance so they don't get burned the same way twice. It's not about you being unworthy of love. It's about them struggling with their own inner battles. The irony is that ignoring can end up intensifying love rather than protecting against it. When they create space, they end up thinking about you more, missing you more, and feeling the weight of your absence. What they feared, losing control of their emotions, often becomes stronger in silence. But in the moment, ignoring feels like the safest shield they can hold up. It gives them time to process, to calm themselves, and to regain a sense of emotional balance. That's why the one who loves you a lot sometimes ignores you a lot, because their feelings are so strong they overwhelm them, and silence becomes the only defense they know how to use to protect themselves. Silence has a way of speaking louder than words, and when someone who loves you chooses to ignore you, it often creates a powerful effect they may not even realize. The absence of communication forces you to think, to reflect, and to feel their presence in a way that constant interaction never could. When they go quiet, your mind begins to wander. You replay past conversations, you analyze their actions, and you start to miss the energy they once brought into your life. This is the hidden power of silence. It amplifies desire and forces reflection. When someone loves you a lot but chooses distance, their silence creates an emotional vacuum. Human beings are naturally wired to fill empty spaces. When you no longer hear from them, your thoughts rush in to fill that silence. You begin to question why they're quiet, what they might be thinking, and whether their feelings have changed. Ironically, this makes their presence stronger in your mind. They may be silent in action, but they are loud in thought because the mystery of their silence keeps pulling your attention back to them. For the one who is ignoring, this silence can also serve as a way of keeping their feelings under control, but it has an unintended effect. It makes their love linger in your heart even more. The more they withhold, the more curious you become, and the more powerful their presence feels. This is why people often find themselves drawn back to the ones who ignored them at some point. It's not because silence is comforting, but because silence leaves space for the imagination to do the work. And what the imagination creates is often stronger than anything words could achieve. This dynamic can build desire because it interrupts the constant flow of communication that people take for granted. When someone is always available, you stop noticing the depth of their presence. But when that availability disappears, suddenly you realize what's missing. Silence magnifies value. It makes you appreciate what you had because it contrasts sharply with the emptiness you feel when it's gone. That contrast creates longing, and longing is one of the strongest drivers of desire. Silence also creates a mirror. When you're left alone without responses, you're forced to reflect on your own emotions. You begin to ask yourself questions like, why do I miss them so much? Why do I feel this emptiness without them? Why am I thinking about them constantly? These questions reveal the depth of the connection, and they push you to confront feelings you might have ignored before. So the one who withdraws might believe they're protecting themselves, but in reality, they are amplifying the emotional bond by giving you space to realize what they truly mean to you. Over time, this pattern creates unforgettable impressions. Words fade, gestures can be overlooked, but silence is never forgotten. It lingers in the mind because it is unresolved. When someone you love ignores you, you're left with unanswered questions, and the mind naturally keeps circling back to those gaps This is why people say they never forget the one who pulled away. It's because silence created an unfinished story that keeps playing in the background of the heart. And that is why the one who loves you a lot ignores you a lot, because their silence unintentionally amplifies your desire and forces you to reflect, leaving an impact that is far stronger than constant attention ever could.